So reference tracks are a great way of improving our music production skills, and today I'm going to show you 3 ways in which you can use them. But before I do, if you're looking for any free music production resources, go check out the free downloads page in the description. First one today we're going to be talking about is how we can use reference tracks to help us with learning arrangement. And this is, in my opinion, the best way in which you can learn arrangement. And what we're going to be doing is just purchasing your track, downloading the MP3 or the WAV file and dragging it into the DAW as I have here. And we're literally going to be mapping out the track and its arrangement with locators in Ableton. Now, if you're in Logic or another DAW, you can use markers and the same concept applies, but I'm gonna hit play here and start making some locators. So right here at the start, we have a intro with drums. Let's have a listen. You can see the waveform's going to change here, so something's going to be happening here. Okay, so the low end of the kick comes in. Low end kick, you get the idea. So there's some ambience building, right? Okay, so the bass comes in, bass in, high pass. And it looks like here we have a little 8-bar build. Great, so now I've just mapped out the first little section of this track, and you can see how the changes are occurring in the track and how the track is evolving. And it's a great way to learn arrangement because you're both learning by doing, but you're also training your ear to think analytically as well. So you're listening to the track analytically and you're notating all the changes that are occurring, and then you can delete this track and actually use this as a guide. It depends how much you want to follow this. Sometimes it's nice to follow a semi-structured guide. Sometimes you want a really structured one, so you can be as in-depth as you would like in this process, but it's a really good way to learn arrangement. It's the way that I originally learnt arrangement, and it's very specific to the music that you want to be making and your style and the music that you like. So if you are struggling a little bit with the arrangement stuff, I really can't recommend this technique highly enough. It's very effective. Now, if you're inspired by a particular track, using references is a great way for developing your sound design skills as well. So what you can do is the same technique here, mapping it out, and this arrangement mapping is also going to help with the sound design aspect as well. But this time we're just going to be thinking about particular sounds that you like and particular techniques within the song that we like. So let's have a listen to this little build section and I'll explain a little bit about one of the techniques in here. So maybe you're inspired by this technique in here, which is building up a lot of space and then stripping it back. So you can hear after this drop, the sort of ambience that is built up by those pads is stripped away and it's very sort of minimalistic, and that bass line is pumping in there. So maybe you like the space build up. So we can type in space build and then strip it back at the drop. So then we can now go ahead and delete this track and start producing according to these particular techniques that you like. So analyzing and trying to recreate techniques is a really powerful approach. It's going to make your sound design sessions a little bit less demoralizing because you're not trying to just copy a sound that is in the track. But if you are inspired by a sound, that is totally okay as well. So I'll give you a quick example here. I've just got some kicks here. So let's say we're inspired by this bass line here. So let's try and recreate something similar. Now, if I'm having a listen analytically, I'm thinking this bass line kind of sounds like a square wave. So let's have another listen to that. square wave, it's got a bit of envelope that's decaying, a little bit of filter movement as well. So maybe I could pull in a preset from analog, maybe go over to the bass sections. So I've got this square wave analog preset here. I'm just going to listen to this bass line a little bit again and just try and be inspired by it and create something with a similar vibe, but not too similar. Just inspired by the technique of using a square wave bass line in this particular way. All right, let's give this a crack. I'm just going to maybe pull down this filter a bit. Right, so there's some similarities in terms of like tone and texture, and this is where it's great because it's giving us an inspiration source to work from, and then I can just go ahead and like delete this track and make this my own track from here, and we can start building things from there. So again, just to recap, we can use reference tracks to give us an inspiration source for sound design techniques. Now, I really recommend going through and trying to analyze the techniques within the tracks and then trying to replicate the techniques. That way nothing's really subjected to copying. You're training your ear and you're also developing your own style at the same time. So I've done a much more in-depth video on being inspired by the tracks and extracting techniques and whatnot in the past. So if you want to learn more about that, I'll link it at the top as well. Reference tracks are also great for mixing, but it's a little bit of a touchy subject at times because reference tracks can also be used in the wrong way for mixing. So first of all, the way you don't want to be using reference tracks in mixing is being back and forth and trying to adapt your track to make it sound more like theirs. The first thing you have to understand is that every track is their own thing. It's got their own vibe, own particular sound. If you're trying to A-B back and forward and boost the highs in your track to make it sound brighter, more like theirs, that's a really easy way to upset the balance of your own track. I'm going to talk a little bit how I set up my reference mixes and how you can use them in the correct way. First of all, you want to pick your reference track for a very particular reason. So let's say you've got the track that you know has a really nice tight low end. It has a perfect amount of kick, a perfect amount of sub. So that way you can flick back and forth and see how deep they're going with their subs, see how much their kick is punching through, and it will just give you a little bit of clarity as to where you can go and how far you can push your track. So you can choose tracks for their low end, you can choose tracks for their groove or their punch or even their stereo image. This is something I used to do a lot. So the first thing you want to do is pull your track in and name it accordingly, and then adjust the levels to fit the track that you're mixing. So for me, I like to do it by ear, maybe using a metering plugin as a guide, but there's also plugins that will do this level matching for you as well. And in this track in particular, I've actually got two external references of different tracks here, but I've also got another 3 references, and this is the premix of my track. So have a listen to this track. It sounds like this. And so these 3 references that I've got here are this track that have been bounced out before the mixdown, so that I can make sure that the adjustments that I'm making are actually going in the right direction. They're actually making it improve the track. So I've got the drums here. I've got a reference for the low end here as well, which is just the drums and the bass. And then I've also got a pre-mix reference, which is the exact same as what you're hearing up here as well. Just to make sure that I'm heading in the right direction when I'm mixing my tracks. So these pre-mix references are really, really handy. And the best way to swap back and forth between them if you're in Ableton is if you hit Command K, you'll pull up your key mapping and you can just go over to the solo switches over here and just assign these solo switches to things like numbers on your keyboard. So I've got 1, 2, 3. I can even set this to 4 and this one to 5 if we like. And that way I can swap really easily between all these references. So once we've set up our reference tracks as we like it, remember to use your reference tracks as like a guide to where you could potentially move the mix down of your track. So I'm going to have a listen to my track here and then swap back and forth between these references, and you can see how they're going to be different. They're all going to be different, but they just give me a sense of clarity of where I could go. So the drums in this track right now are very clean, they're very deep, the bass is quite present and it extends quite low. And have a listen to the difference between this one. So this one is a lot less clean with the drums. It's very saturated and distorted, and the low end doesn't extend as deep, which is totally fine. But have a listen to this next one here as well. So this one is kind of in between because the drums are cleaner than the last one, but the low end is much more subtle and it is a lot deeper as well. So we can see that there's 3 completely different vibes here, and we can use these tracks differently. So I really like the snare in this track and how poppy it is. And if I'm swapping back and forth between my track, it's making me think that perhaps I need to bring my snare up, make it a little bit more poppy. It makes me think that also I could make my drums a little bit punchier perhaps, and maybe I could dirty them up a little bit as well. It's also making me think that the low end of this track probably could have been tamed a little bit. It's quite deep and quite intense, and it could probably be brought back just a tad. So just to recap, it's really nice to use external tracks to reference the mixes again. Just remember, the forefront of your mind should be that your track is your own, and these reference tracks are just a guide. There's no use comparing exactly your mix to another and trying to replicate exactly the amount of low end or the exact amount of brightness or punch as another track. There's no industry standard for any of these measures. So just make sure that you're using it in that way and still making decisions that's going to benefit your track. And this can be a very, very useful technique. So that's it for today. I hope you've learned a few things about the power of reference tracks. If you've enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.